opportunity. Sure, let's start from the B2B or go straight to the.
Yeah, B2B, just everything 5 minutes.
All right.
Yeah, just 5 minutes.
All right. Azure Active Directory B2B, that is business to business, or B2C, business to customer. B2B actually allows an external organization to connect your app. For instance, B2B has the fixtures to automatically manage the users based on the user's identity. Offshore the management to the original organization from where the user's identity comes from, or let the user self-manage the account. A sample of this is use dynamic group to automatically assign a user to a group based on their attributes such as user's email, user's type, user's name, allow users self-image the account or request access to application via my app portal. Also, to allow the user to sign in once an application into an application which the user has the access. So this also happen on the trusted network access, MFA enforcement, trusted devices access, and to view audits and report log for a user. So this happened on B2B on the Azure Active Directory. Then compared to B2C, which stands for business to customer, you can federate to any identity provider which supports standard protocol. OpenID Connect, such as an OA authorization or OA auth or SAM. You define and customize authentication and authorization process via policy. All right.
Yeah.
So this happen in a place like an example of this is when you're trying to gain access into your email on Google's, on Facebook's, and all that. So if you want external users to give access to your Office 365 app, then B2B is the way to go. And like I said, for B2C, signing into using into Facebook's and Google's and Yahoo's and all that, they are example of B2 customer. So that is that.
Thank you.
On the other one, which is to register a domain in the Active Directory of Azure, well, I just as the assignments read, said we should try and register the domain in any of our domain registrar sites. So I tried to get to the internet and register the domain. New one, I have the old one, but I don't have access to the control panel any longer, so I couldn't link it up. So I'll register a new one, the cheapest I can find. So I searched out the domain and picked one and paid. I waited for the propagation, so I got all the control panel access and information. I signed it to Azure portal and
Yeah.
search for the Active Directory, then pick custom domain. I added the domain name and choose test-to-point access to copy the destination address. I went back to the cPanel, searched for the domain zone, and initialize the text, pick the TST
Okay.
and
The record.
had it and put the TST address from the Microsoft Azure. So initially I was having problem with the TTL because the Microsoft Azure had the TTL of 3,600, while the site has my own domain site as the site of 14,400. So I was trying to make them equal, and the site was rejecting it. I was there for more than this thing, for more than a day. I've been trying that since we left the off, left the since we left the training. So it just occurred to me after I posted that in the internet that why not? If this is the problem, let me just ignore the TTL after I search out on Google what is TTL, time to life. Oh,
Time,
so
time to,
if that's the problem, I don't think maybe they just have different policy. So I just left the 14,400 like that, changed the text point to address, and I added it successfully on my cPanel of the domain, went back to Azure and clicked verify, and it was verified.
yeah.
So that's
So
all.
yeah, so now you have an Azure account, you have a verified domain name.
Yes.
Correct. Good. Thank you so much. Thank you for the effort and for speaking up. Is there anybody else that want to say something about business to business, business to customer? Anybody? Let's set this up. Any other contributor? Oh, are you putting something in the chat? I shared the link in the chat now. It's a brief overview of the comparison between authentication and authorization. So those are questions you might come across when you're having conversations or during an interview, depending on the interview. Okay. Do you want to say something? All right. So how many of us registered a domain name? Nobody?
It,
I didn't hear you.
I have a domain name already.
Already. Okay. Verified. Is it embedded on your Active Directory?
No, I missed the last class. So.
Okay. Did you check the video?
Yeah, I've started watching the video, but I haven't completed it. But I'll be able to catch it.
Okay. I want to sign into my account. Give me a minute. It wants me to authenticate now. I'm giving it. Okay. To scan a QR code. A minute. Okay. All right. Welcome to class. Thank you for the icebreaker. So we are going forward to Active Directory, and we stopped here. The last class, we were trying to differentiate between Windows Server Active Directory and Azure Active Directory. So the Windows Server Active Directory is the Active Directory setup on premises. That is the Active Directory environment on premises, located on premises. That is where you start dealing with domain controllers, Active Directory, forests. Is anybody familiar with domain controllers?
Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's
No.
I lost you. Are you saying something?
I said no.
Okay. So domain controllers is a server. So that is where we manage the GPOs, group policy objects, organizational units. So Windows Server Active Directory is a very complex setup. You're going to be using a lot of tools to set up the Windows Active Directory environment. Okay. ADFS, Windows Domain Service, ADDS. Okay, like 3 components makes up the Windows Server Active Directory on premises. Then for authentication, we use Kerberos. Okay, Kerberos or NTLM for authentication. Then, of course, the Active Directory is where you have your identities. So when we talk about identities, you're going to be coming across this a lot. Identities are your username and passwords, groups, anything that can be authenticated within the Active Directory. Users, service accounts, service principals, service accounts, users will have them, the credentials in Active Directory. So the Active Directory is actually a database where we store all these usernames and passwords, but that's just one of the components. So beyond that, we need domain controllers to manage how we integrate these users into the organization. So you have an organization on premises, okay? This is an organization. They have their domain name. Every other user has their own peculiar domain email that carries the company's domain name. Okay. Now, that's how we run Active Directory on premises. But thanks to cloud technology, we now have Azure Active Directory. So still Active Directory, but now you don't get to set up servers. You don't spin up servers, okay? You don't configure domain controllers. This is just chunky. If you create if you create an Azure account today, you don't have to create Active Directory. By default, Active Directory comes with the portal. So if you already have a Microsoft Azure portal, if you search globally, so when I say search globally, if you use the search bar, if you execute a global search, you find Active Directory. Here it is. Already set up. Okay? Already set up. Active Directory is already set up. So you can have more than one tenant, multiple tenants. I can't really give you the number of tenants. So this is the tenant. This tenant belongs to Blex Technologies. So I can have multiple tenants within an account. This is an account, okay? This is a Microsoft Azure account, everything you have here. But within this Microsoft Azure account, I have multiple tenants, okay? So this is where you manage tenants. I can add more tenants and they will have their domain names. Just like Coyote registered his own domain name, right? So we can come back to this same account and create a new tenant, either Active Directory tenant or business to customer. Okay. So if it's Azure Active Directory tenant, so based on your business needs, based on the customer's requirements, you are going to determine which one do you want to go for. Is it an Active Directory tenant or a business to customer tenant? So if you are going for the business to customer, that means you want to customize sign-in, using other identity management experience. That is just the basic explanation. You want to be able to make users authenticate using third-party authentication services. For instance, if we go to, let me see, Uber Eats. Okay, sign up. Can you see? Uber Eats is not giving us their account. Like they're not saying, okay, provide you the username you want to use, provide your password. But Uber Eats is saying, if you have accounts here, use your account, use your Google account, your Apple account, your Facebook account to sign up with your phone number so you can start using Uber Eats. So what's going on here? This business to customer. Align third-party services to authenticate into Uber Eats application. Okay, so does it make sense now? So sometimes you try to set up an account, maybe a cinema, maybe you want to book a ticket at the cinema and you want to order online. And instead of asking you for username and password, they're saying, okay, if you have a Google account, use your Google account to open an account to book your ticket, movie ticket. Or maybe you're trying to register for an event on Eventbrite or any of these platforms. And instead of them asking you to set up an account, they're saying, okay, create an account, but when you want to create the account, use any of these third-party options. So some can say if you have a Twitter account, use it to sign up. If you have a whatever, what other ones? Maybe Samsung, Android, something. Just use that third party. That means that Uber Eats is saying we trust these guys. We trust Google. We trust the identity service managed by Google, managed by Apple. We trust the identity service managed by Facebook. So since we trust them, we believe their level of security, their level of compliance. So if you can successfully run an account in Google, Apple, Facebook, yeah, that means we trust you because you are using a trusted platform. So use that same credentials to open an account on our own platform. So this is the typical example of business to customer. So whenever you come across this other times, just remember that you are setting up a business to customer account. The limitation in this point is that with the business to customer Active Directory, you won't be able to utilize most of course, you won't be able to have access to most of the Microsoft services, Office 365 subscriptions. It's for third party, it's for customers. But the business to business is where the big deal is, within the organization, internal. Maybe you have other vendors that you want to join, you want to invite into the organization. Yeah. So usually in most cases, you won't have to set up a business to customer unless it's a peculiar customer you are working with. So we are going to set up a Active Directory configuration. So here we provide the domain name you want to use, specify the data center location. So it's very important. So the location of the organization will determine the region we are going to select. So if the organization is in, let's see, if the organization is in Spain, so you have to set up the tenant in this data center. Okay, so this data center is going to be in Europe. Even though it's not that you have data centers in every country, but it's regional based. So the closest data center here is going to be Europe. So once we have this set up, then you can create a tenant. So you can create multiple tenants for multiple businesses. But most of the time, that doesn't mean that you as a consultant, you can now have one portal and have a business for Uber Eats, a business for Facebook. No, it doesn't work like that. It's for you. So consider a multilateral organization, a global organization, okay? They have different businesses they are supporting. Maybe they have an application that supports real estate. They have another application that supports maybe event management services. They have another application that supports ticketing systems. Okay, so they can configure their environment into different tenants. So not everybody will be able to have access to all the tenants. Your level of access, your permissions will determine if you can navigate across all these tenants. So, so that's that for the Active Directory. So usually we get to create users. I want to use another account. What's going on? Always requiring authentication. Take this away in a minute. That is security for you. It's right. Active Directory. So let's create users. So how do we create user? Want to create a user. How do we create users? So I already have some users here already created. So usually just go ahead, add a user, create a new user. So you can either create a user or invite an external user. So if you create a new user, that means that the person will carry the organization's domain name. So they are internal. You can invite external user. Perhaps the external user is a vendor, third-party vendor. Maybe you have third-party vendors that manages your procurement, that manages maintenance, or maybe you just need them to help on a project. Maybe you have 10 developers that you need to employ for 6 months. They're not going to be on your organization for long, for a given period of time. Instead of creating a user account for them and setting up licenses and all those things, why not invite them? They will use their own email, whatever email they have, to sign up. Then you can allocate all the resources, all the permissions they need. And once they finish the project, they are going to be around for 6 months, for 1 year, 3 months. You disconnect them from the organization. So I'm going to create a new user. So let's give this guy a username. I don't have a domain name, registered domain name here. So I'm just going to use the default domain name. So let's give this guy AZ class 123. Okay, that's the username. Oh no, let's give a real name. James Phil. Okay, perhaps a British guy. So the name is James Phil. First name James. Last name Phil. So this guy just joined this organization. Okay, he just joined the organization. So you, as a cloud administrator, you got an email. Mr. James is going to be joining the organization in 2 weeks. While we await his resumption, kindly set up an account for James Phil. Okay, so the person that sent that, is anybody familiar with this protocol? So so maybe the manager or the hiring manager for James Phil was the one that sent out the email to you, a cloud administrator. Please create an account, create a profile, set up the SharePoint. These are the services it will have access to. Please make that possible. These are the licenses. So all those information will be in an email, and all you need to do is come to, because you have the permissions to do this, you come here, create the account. Maybe you want Microsoft to generate the password, okay? Or you just create a password. Usually, this is the kind of password I use, change me. I use change me. Change me 123. That's the initial password. Then, so which group is this guy going to join? So in a typical organization, you're going to have security, DevOps team, sales and marketing. Okay, so all kinds of groups, community engagement, social responsibility. So just imagine any group, HR, finance. Okay, so this is how you categorize groups. So this guy is going to join the developers group. Okay, so I'm going to add him there. What are his roles? So what are his level of permission? What do you want him to do? He's going to join the developers. So let's see if there's any application developer. Okay. Operations, security operator. Okay, so it's going to be a security operator. Let's see. Application developer. Do you want to block signing? No, we need this guy to sign up. So we're not going to block signing. You say location. The organization is in the US. So we're going to lock this account down to the US. Job title, department. So those are information you can add. Who is the manager? So these are the users. So maybe who's the manager? Jack Sparrow is the manager. Okay, so go ahead and create the account. The roles could not be created possibly because I don't have permission.
Please, can you hear me?
Yes. Who's that?
All right, okay. I saw that under block sign-in, you clicked yes. Can you please give an explanation for why it's yes? And also, I said under block sign-in, that's
Click yes. There.
under the settings for block sign-in, you clicked yes. I didn't quite get the explanation for why it's yes.
Yeah, I shouldn't have. It was I missed that. So let's fix that. So usually if you want to block sign-in, maybe the person is not down the organization. Okay. Because I chose block sign-in, so this was not checked, but if I enable the account, so there are many reasons why we might want to block sign-in, but because it's a new account, I might want to block sign-in until the James's resumption date, okay? Or I might block sign-in if I'm just doing testing. I don't want this to leak to anybody so that they don't use that to sign in into the organization. You know, I use a generic password.
Okay.
It can fall into the hands of anybody and they can just randomize the password and break into the organization. So use best practice, block the sign-in until you get the approval that, okay, release the account for the so maybe the person is going to start work on Monday. You can release the account on Monday morning before it resumes, or maybe Sunday night before the James resumes, and just come around and enable the account. All you just need to check this box and enable the account. So that's just a layer of security. So even without being a security expert, some things you are doing, you are trying to integrate the security side of things just to harden your environment, make your organization less vulnerable to attacks, threats, and malicious activities. All right, so I'm going to enable the account. So Mr. James can join whenever he's ready. So maybe I want to allocate some licenses to James. Okay, there's no license available to assign because this is a free account. Okay, this is a free subscription. So that's how we create users. Typically, you create users in that manner. You can bulk create users. Okay, so if I come back to users, I can use this feature, the bulk operations feature, to create multiple users at the same time, like automating user creation. Okay, if I have multiple, so I'm going to download this file. So maybe I want to onboard like 200 users. Imagine the stress of inputting 200 names, first name, last name, username, generate the password, you know, for 200 people. Instead of doing that, I can use the CSV file, it's like an Excel sheet, to record the names. Okay, this is what the file looks like. Okay, so I can use this file. These are their username, password. Okay, so once I provide all this information, up to as many as you can, all I just need is to upload the file. So I just upload the file. Okay, and it will take a while for all the names to show. As long as you follow the columns and provide information as needed, you're going to find all the names here. Instead of inputting the names one by one, it's just a way of making the things less cumbersome for cloud administrators. So when you hear of cloud administrators, back in the days, we have system administrators. Okay, so that's the equivalent on premises. So in the cloud, you have cloud administrators, and their job is almost similar. It's just that for cloud administrators, everything is in the cloud over the browser, unlike system administrators where they are actually dealing with machines, devices. Okay, so that is how we bulk create. So let's go back into the course material. Let's look at some important features. So Azure Active Directory also provides the ability for users to manage their passwords. Gone are those days when in the office you forgot your username and you forgot your password. You know, you need to tell the help desk. Maybe you have a hotline to contact help desk, or there's an email you need to issue a ticket and say, okay, please, I can't remember my passwords. I remember those days when users will call and say, I can't log into my account. Instead of them to just own up and say, I forgot my password, what they will tell you is, why can't I log into my account? I'm having it difficult to log into my account since yesterday, which is not the right thing. They forgot their password and now they are locked out. So for on-premises, you need help desk to help you manage your accounts, give you a temporary password that you can use, and then change your password. But in Azure Active Directory, there is a tool we call the self-service password reset. Okay, so the self-service password reset transfers that responsibility to the user. You can change your password. You don't have to wait for help desk. So you have that authority to change your password. So let's see, password resets. I need a license. So you need a P1 or P2 license. So let me see if I have license on my secondary tenants. So I have 3 tenants. Can you see? So I have 3 tenants. And each tenant is dedicated to a service. You know, they have their different names. Active Directory. Let's see if I have. Okay, I have a P2 license. So to be able to enjoy self-service password reset, you need a P2 license. You need a premium license, either P1 or P2. Okay, P1 or P2 license. Password reset. So this is where we set things up. So from what you have here, I can either select all or select a group of people that will have this functionality on their identity. So if I choose selected, that means I want to actually say only users in the account department or in the May team or Azure AD domain controller administrators, or, you know, I just want to lock it down to members of the account team, that they are the only ones that will be able to use the password reset function of Azure Active Directory. So there is no rule of thumb as to how you manage this. So businesses will determine how they want to run their organization. They will tell you how they want things to go. In most cases, you'll be required to enable self-service password reset for everybody. So I'm going to lock it down to all. Now we set up authentication method. So I need to save this. Make sure you save. Authentication methods. So this is where we set up multi-factor authenticators. Okay. So does this look familiar? What is the number of methods to reset? So when we say number of methods to reset, we are saying that number of methods that a user needs to be able to reset their password. Okay, you should provide your email, provide your mobile phone number, provide. So this is multi-factor authentication at play. So anytime you are trying to set up an account and you are okay, provide your username, provide your password, provide your phone number, you're going to get a one-time PIN number on your phone. So that is MFA at work. This is where MFA starts from. So as a cloud administrator, those are some of your responsibilities. You configure multi-factor authenticator for users. Okay. So now I'm going to enable 2 methods. All right. So out of those methods, these are the methods available for users. Mobile app notification, mobile app code, or security questions. So all these options are available for the user. And then, so it gets more interesting when I want to set up security questions. So if I'm setting, excuse me. So if I'm configuring security questions, so from here, can you explain what this means? So the first one says number of questions required to register and number of questions required to reset. So what do you think each of this feature means? Anybody?
I think it means that when you want to register an account or a user, the person has to create, when the user is registering an account, right? The person has to answer questions like 3 to 5. So depending on the number you choose, and when you are resetting your password, you also have an option to choose. As an administrator, you tell the number of questions that should be there for the person to have a successful account creation or password reset.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the effort. So what we just said is that.
Can I ask a question?
Hold on, please. Hold on before I lose my thought. Hold on, John. I will come back to you. So what we say now is here, when you are setting up the account, you want to create an account at ubereats.com. Okay. And or maybe you are creating an insurance brokerage account or payment account. So you provided your username, you provide the password, and say, okay, for you to be able to recover your password, you need to provide some security questions so that if you ever forget your password, in addition to the username and everything, the questions you have answered will also help you to recover your account. So the way it's set up, as an administrator, maybe based on company policy, you can say, at the time of setting up your account, provide answers to 3 questions, random questions, or provide answer to 4 questions, or provide answer to 5 questions. In the event that you lose your password or something happened to your account, somebody was trying to persistently break into your account and they couldn't. Now you need to recover your account. So in the event of any of that, if you are able to answer 3, okay, if you're able to answer 3 questions out of the 5 questions you provided, you'll recover your account. Or if you are able to answer 4 out of the 5, or 5 out of the 5. So there is really no system of determining these questions. Your company, your team will determine how you want to run things. So maybe you want to say, okay, provide answer to 5 questions. But if you're able to answer 3 questions, you will have your account back. Okay, so let's look at some security questions. So are these questions familiar? So that kind of questions you come across when you are setting up accounts freshly. Okay, maybe a new banking application, a new maybe mortgage account. So it depends. Food ordering business, trying to set up an account. These are the kind of questions you come across. So as an administrator, this is where you get your questions. Microsoft has already provided some sample questions. Okay, so you can always customize, you can add more questions. Okay, what is your favorite color? Okay, so those are customized questions. So I'm going to add it right now. I can now say, so let's select the random questions. Just pick up some questions. These are the questions that will be available for users. So it's just going to generate it in no sequential order. Okay, so once this is completed, go ahead and save. That is done. And this is enforced for all the users in this account, in this tenant, all the users. Now, we said you can have on-premises Windows Active Directory and Azure Active Directory. I thought somebody was going to ask me, so what happens to an organization that wants to move to the cloud? Does that mean that they are going to lose their on-premises Active Directory? No, they won't lose it. Microsoft has come up with a solution to help customers migrate their Active Directory to Azure. And what is that solution? The Azure Active Directory Connect. We call it AD Connect. So with AD Connect, all you need is to migrate the users to Azure. You don't need Kerberos, okay? You don't need Kerberos for authentication. You don't need group policy objects. You don't need domain controllers. All those items you need to manage on-premises Active Directory, you don't need them. You remember I said Azure Active Directory is a turnkey. You come in, it's already set up. Just provide your usernames, passwords, groups you want to add. So it's already set up for you. And now we have more resilient authorization methods and authentication methods. So now we have access to the self-service password reset, okay, SSPR, and then different authentication methods, OAuth, OpenID, SAML, all these are authentication methods. And now that your users can now operate in Azure, they now have access to Azure resources. So maybe you come across a customer that is already using Microsoft 365 license. They create users, you know, Microsoft 365, Exchange server. You create users, you create roles and all those things. You may not need Azure, but the moment the organization start talking about virtual machines, virtual networks, app services, Kubernetes, Docker, now they need to go to Azure. They need to up their game. They need to push things further. So for them to be able to manage Azure resources, they will need to host the Active Directory in Azure. So if you want to integrate this Azure Active Directory to the on-premises. Okay, I can integrate to on-premises if I have Azure AD Connect. So another thing I want to point out is that because you don't want the users on premises to lose their applications. So these are applications on premises. Example of applications, Jira. Maybe they have their customized procurement or application. They have their customized tool for, what was it called? So give me an example. Jira, Confluence, Trello. So they want their users to continue to utilize their on-premises applications. And now users are going to be created in Azure. There's a feature in Azure AD Connect that makes it possible for users to be able to connect to on-premises applications. That is the password write back functionality. Password write back. So now you're not going to be creating users on premises. Your users will be created in Azure, but their credentials will be registered on premises in your on-premises Windows Active Directory server, so that they'll be able to authenticate into the on-premises services. All right. So yeah, self-service password write back. So that is how users are able to continue to utilize their on-premise applications. You know, sometimes you might have legacy applications that the organization does not want to decommission. Okay, and they are still using it. So in that case, you have to provide a solution. Okay, so the Azure AD Connect is the tool that is used to enable a hybrid. So what we are trying to do now is hybrid. Okay, so this is a hybrid setup. This is on premises. This is Azure. Different environments. This is a hybrid setup. Okay, so when you hear about hybrid, is it a hybrid identity? What is hybrid? You have an on-premises identity setup, and you have a cloud identity setup. Okay. So let's look at some concepts in Active Directory. You have identity, anything that can be authenticated. Username, password can be authenticated. Servers that require authentication. Applications that require secret management, you know, that needs to authenticate into some services, okay, that needs secret keys, that needs certificates. So if you are security-oriented personnel, you'll be familiar with all this. So all these fall under the category of identities. Then you have accounts, okay? So this is your portal.azure.com is an account. Okay, you authenticate into that account with a username and password, and then you start creating users. Okay. Now we have Active Directory accounts, Azure Active Directory accounts. So these are your usernames you create within the organization's tenant that carries your organization's domain name. Okay. It is either your work account or school account, you know. For colleges, they have customized domain names, and students have dedicated emails that carries the school's domain name. So those are going to fall under the Azure Active Directory account. You know, maybe they were already using Microsoft 365 e-license. Okay, and now If they don't need anything in Azure, they will stick to their Microsoft 365 license. Otherwise, they will need to come higher. Now, there's the tenant, okay? Directory, tenant, we're going to use the interchangeably. So the tenant is a single dedicated instance. So each tenant, you know, in my own case, I have 3 tenants. So each tenant is dedicated to an organization, is dedicated to an application, is dedicated to a resource. So it depends on how you want to run your organization. So you determine what goes where. And then there is a subscription. Remember I said create a pay-as-you-go subscription. So without a subscription, you can't literally do anything in Azure. Let me explain subscription. So for subscription, so like if you go to the movie, it's been a while since I've attended the cinema, but let me see if you can remember. If you go to the movie, to the cinema, you want to see a new movie, right? You go to the cashier or the front desk and you pay, right, with your credit card. Then you get a ticket. In some environments, it is that ticket you will provide at the door to the viewing room itself. Maybe there's a security personnel at the entrance. You're going to present the receipt you were given at the front desk. That is what will allow you to go in to see the movie. You are not going with your credit card again. You've already exchanged your credit card information with that receipt. And you can use that receipt to see the movie. Now, with Azure subscription, you are not going to be loading your card. So this is applicable in an enterprise environment. But if you are just doing things on the go, if you are just doing testings, just trying to figure out how things work, well, you can go for pay as you go. If you are a student that has a student email that ends with .edu, okay, at least for the United States, I know if you have a .edu email, there's a dedicated subscription for student accounts. So the subscription is how we pay for cloud services. So it's going to be linked to your credit card. Right. So in your conversations, these are questions you want to ask. If you're trying to onboard somebody to Azure Active Directory, do you already have license? Are you already using Microsoft 365 enterprise license, or are you using Azure Dynamics, you know? So if they already have this, you want to drill down and say, okay, let's see if you'll be eligible for some benefits. So let's look at the Azure Active Directory domain services and Azure Active Directory. So the Azure Active Domain services is the full component of the on-premises Active Directory, okay? The Windows Server Active Directory, okay? This is where you have your domain controller set up, and then you have the group policy objects, organizational units. All these are components we use to manage on-premises Active Directory. So with the Azure Active Directory, now, maybe before, if you're familiar with this term, maybe before the pandemic, in some cases, you can't do anything in the company network unless you are in the office. Okay? You can't remote. You can't do anything on the organizational network unless you remote your VPN into the company's network. You can't change your password. You can't check your email unless you are within the company network. That was a time. But now, with the help of cloud identity management, Azure Active Directory, for example, you can access, look at me, I'm accessing Active Directory over the browser. I don't need to remote into any organization to do this. Maybe this is an organization, Azure demo, and I don't need to remote into this organization. Over the browser, I can manage the whole Active Directory infrastructure for this organization. Okay, so that's one key benefit. So you can manage Active Directory over the browser. When I say over the browser, remember the protocols, HTTP and HTTPS, port 80 and port 443. We use REST APIs, so you can use REST APIs, so command line interface to manage Active Directory. Okay. With on-premises Active Directory, you use LDAP for querying Active Directory services. Okay. LDAP, but in Azure, we don't need LDAP anymore. We are dealing with REST APIs. For authentication, no more Kerberos. Okay. Kerberos and NTLM are phased out. We don't need them anymore. What are we using in Azure? SAML, Windows Service Federation, OpenID Connect. Okay. Over the browser, more importantly, you are not remoting into any network. You can manage the Active Directory service over the browser. You don't need to remote. Even when you want to change your password, you now have the self-service password reset functionality on your account. You don't need to remote into the company network. You can do this over the browser. The listing is maybe the tech team will send you a link where you can change your password or where you can set up your account, provide your authentication service that you want to use to manage your account. Okay. We don't use group policy objects in Azure. We don't need it anymore. Organizational units, these are things similar to Windows Server Active Directory. So the Azure Active Directory is a flat structure. Flat structure. You're not creating anything on your own. Everything is turnkey. Come in, bring in your usernames, bring in your Active Directory, and start enjoying the service. The Azure Active Directory is a managed service. What do we mean when we say something is a managed service? So in the cloud environment, you'll be hearing things like managed service. You'll be hearing that, okay, is it a managed service? That means that is it managed by the cloud service provider? So AWS now, you have AWS EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service. AWS EKS. You have AWS ECR, Elastic Container. Okay, all those are managed by AWS. Same thing, Azure. The Active Directory is managed by Microsoft, is managed by Azure, is a managed service. Okay. In your own case, you are only concerned with the users and excuse me. Yes, sorry about that break in transmission. Where were we? So in your own case, the Azure Active Directory is managed by Azure. What you are only concerned about are your users, groups, and policies. Okay. So remember I said you're going to bring your usernames, your accounts, if you are coming from on-premises. So we have different pricing, licensing editions. So you're going to hear about license, pricing tiers when you are dealing in the cloud. Customers, the next question they want to ask is how much? How much is it going to cost me? If I want to start small, is there a possibility of starting small? Okay. So for Azure Active Directory, you can either have the free tier, or if you are already using Exchange Server, Office 365, which is now Microsoft 365, of course, you can be using this already. But once you move to the portal to Azure, then you're going to elevate to either the P2 license, the P1 license, or the P2 license. So if you look at my account, you can see that I have the P2 license. This is the enterprise license. So it gives me the ability to be able to manage password reset, identity governance. So the most important thing about the P2 is that it gives me that privileged identity management feature. So let's look at what each has. So with the Microsoft 365, you are only permitted to manage the Office 365 services, applications, SharePoint, Outlook, OneDrive, meetings, bookings, all those Office 365 interesting applications. You get the license to be able to manage them. But if you go to the P1 or P2, the P1 ends at the conditional access management. So conditional access is very important, especially when you're managing devices. For those that are working from home, your identity is set up under this feature such that you're already set up in a way that, okay, allow locations. If you have company's laptop, you're only permitted to use the company laptop in the US. Maybe they have locked down the connection to the United States or United Kingdom or Canada. So conditional access management is a different thing entirely. Is very integrated into Active Directory because we use that to create some policies to manage the devices, especially. So the difference between P1 and P2. So if I were going to ask, also, what the difference between the P1 and the P2 license? Security. The P2 has that security functionality. The privileged identity management feature that comes with the P2 license is what makes it different. So note it, there's the P1, there's a P2 license. What makes P2 license stands out is the privileged identity management functionality, governance, and identity access management that comes with it. Okay. Identity protection, identity governance. Okay. Okay, I think it's already here. It was listed here. Privileged identity management is included to help discover, restrict, monitor administrators and their access to resources, and to provide just-in-time access when needed. That is what makes the P2 license super. Okay, let me see if I can share this. All right, so if you want to check things out, check out this link. Posting it in the chat. Okay. Any question? Are we clear?
Yeah, a question, please.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, I think is this Active Directory the same as AWS IAM?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's identity. So all of these platforms have their identity management environment. AWS, Active Directory. But you know, Active Directory is owned by Microsoft. But
Okay.
there's a way they all cooperate. So in Azure, it's called Microsoft Active Directory. Sorry, in AWS, it's owned by Microsoft. So if you start your own organization today, your own cloud organization, you have to come and pay obeisance to Microsoft because they own it, but they allow other service providers to also, because it's big. You don't want to start from the scratch again. Active Directory is there any organization that doesn't use Active Directory? As long as you have domain name, you have users, you're going to have it set up. So they have been there over the years. And so AWS has their own, Google has their own Active Directory. So this is the AWS is the Active Directory service. Right, AD Connect. Okay, so the password right back that I mentioned the other time. See. Okay, so what time is it? Let's look at, let me see if we can finish up this module. Joins. What do you know by joins? What do you understand by joins? So the Active Directory join is important, especially when we're dealing with devices. Now, I said with Azure Active Directory, you can manage users and devices. Okay, so how do we manage devices? We want to be able to have access to devices that are connected to our network. Okay, so this is a device trying to connect to the Azure network, or maybe you want to establish a hybrid connectivity. Connect to Azure, connect to on-premises Active Directory. Okay, so let's look at some. Okay, is this broken down here? If not, I have to Azure AD join. Let's come back. So there is the, if you're familiar with mobile device management, endpoint management tools like Microsoft Intune, that's a service that is used to manage devices. Then there's the Microsoft's own device management tool, Microsoft Endpoint Manager. Endpoints. Endpoint.microsoft.com. See. So you're going to use the same credentials. So if you already have a portal, just check out these accounts, this location, endpoint.microsoft.com. So if we come to the endpoint.microsoft.com, is integrated with the Active Directory in the portal, and you can see all the users. Remember all the users in my Active Directory. Let's see. Okay, all these are users. We created a user now, James. Okay, now this not here. Let's see. Switch tenants. Okay, I don't have license to use this, I believe. Okay, so we created this guy, James Phil, right? So you can see all your Active Directory resources, even in Intune. So this used to be called Intune. The name has been changed to Microsoft Endpoint Manager. So if you have the permission to access this data, you'll be able to manage users. You'll be able to manage devices. Okay. So your organization, when we say devices, these are devices. Your Windows devices, laptops on Windows operating systems, your Apple devices, Android devices, and Chrome. Well, Chrome, I've not perfected that with Chrome, but you are sure that Windows, Apple, some people say, oh, I'm an Apple person. So once they join the organization, they buy them an Apple laptop. Oh, I'm a Windows person. Once they join the organization, they buy them a Windows laptop. So this is where we manage all those devices. So if I have devices onboarded onto Intune or MEM, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, they will appear here. All these devices will appear here. Okay. License management, everything is here. If I want to push updates, I can push it from here. We talked about conditional access. So let's look at conditional access. So you can configure the policies based on conditions or controls. You see that it's grayed out for me, so I can't configure this because I don't have the required license to be able to set this up. So let's check out the other directory. Okay, so go to endpoint security. Let's check conditional access. So this is where we set up the conditional access policy. Okay, so who are the users? Maybe I'm going to select the users, or maybe I'm going to include all the users in this organization, but please always read all these alerts. Before you even do this, make sure you have your own sandbox, test things before you go into production. So don't lock yourself out. So in this case, select the users. Select users you want to add to this policy. Okay, maybe based on roles, the application developers. Every user that has application developer role will be onboarded onto this policy. Do we have applications that I also want to integrate here? If you don't have applications, leave it. So what are the conditions? Conditions can be based on user risk, sign-in risk, device platforms, policies based on locations, So let's look at user risk. Configure user risk levels needed for policy to be enforced. Let's make this, yes, make this minimum, medium, sign-in risk level. Okay, let's make this medium also. Let's look at locations. So, trusted locations. So let's look at all trusted locations or selected locations. So maybe you want to say only users in the US are allowed. Okay. Only users in the US are allowed. And that if you are trying to connect into the network from outside the US, then we need to enforce MFA. Okay. So we can come up with that policy. Maybe there's any location. Then these are the where you implement the policies that in this policy, all these users that carry the application developer role that are in the US or outside the US, they will require multi-factor authentication, and they will require hybrid Active Directory joined device. Okay, so I'm just configuring conditional access policy. These are different conditions that can determine how this policy is created. Maybe they need to change their password. Okay. So that is where we set up conditional access policy. So you may never have to do this. This is just FYI, because the conversation veered towards that line. So with Azure Active Directory, you can manage risky signage. So based on your conditional access policies that you have put in place, you can now say, okay, we want to get the risky sign-in information. When we say risky sign-in, as the name implies, audit logs, okay? So audit logs is telling me all the activities that are performed in this directory and who are the people that perform those activities. You see, so I set up a self-service password reset. You can see it's already highlighted under the audit log. So for every service, they have their login feature that helps to be able to trace activities over time on that resource. Maybe somebody created a storage account. If you go to the log, activity log of the storage account, you will be able to pull that data. If somebody created a virtual machine, if you go into the activity log of the virtual machine, maybe virtual network. So every resource has activity log. So this virtual network has its own dedicated activity log. All the transactions that have taken place in this virtual network, I'll be able to review it. But not everybody will have the permission to review the activity log. Only those with the level of permissions will be able to review the activity log. So we can join devices, maybe Microsoft owned devices. Okay, then there's a hybrid join whereby even Windows 7, up to Windows 7 devices can be integrated into Azure. So assignment, I want us to research on Azure Active Directory join. Okay, research on Azure Active Directory join. There are like three features provided in Azure Active Directory join. So go ahead, find out those AD joins and what devices are applicable to each of the features. Okay, so we talked about self-service password resets. This is just telling us about all I showed us the other time. All right, so let's check out these questions. Based on our conversation so far, let's answer these questions. Which choice correctly describes Azure Active Directory? I want everybody to answer. Put it in the chat. Type your answer in the chat. "30 seconds. There's nothing to think about. Nobody? Put your answer in the chat. Which choice correctly describes Azure Active Directory? C. Everybody's going for C. Is this binding on everybody? Okay, C. Okay, majority said C. We had more C's than B's. Number 2, what term defines a dedicated and trusted instance of Active Directory? Is it a tenant? Is it an identity? Is it an account?
B.
B.
Fine, dedicated and trusted.
Is it a tenant? Is it
B.
an identity? Is it an account?
B.
Okay, we have more B's. Let's go for B. Number 3, your users want to sign into devices, applications, and services from anywhere. What should you do? Do you join the device? Do you enable the device? Do you register the device?
Register the device.
Okay.
C.
C. Final answer, everybody. C. Okay. C.
Hey!
I told us the other time that in Azure, you don't need GPOs. When I say GPOs, I mean group policy objects. You don't need organizational units anymore. Okay? No GPO, no organizational units, no group policy objects. Is a turnkey, is a flat structure. It's basically an identity solution that you can manage over the browser, over the internet. And number 2, the instance, as I told us the other time, I said is a tenant. Is either a tenant or a directory. You remember when I said I was going to manage tenants? I'm switching over from different instances of the Active Directory. Okay. And number 3, you join devices. You don't register devices. You join devices. That was why I said it's very important. So this assignment is very important. I'll find out the different join in Azure Active Directory. Okay. And let's talk about that on Saturday. All right, let's go back. We go Azure Active Directory. Okay, I think we've done this. Okay, you create users. Yeah, so you can use this material if you want to. I've touched on almost everything. So just, gone are the days where you have to buy books. So the books are online. You don't need to buy. This is a doc page that usually I should have brought a book to class, but I don't need to. I can either download this or just use the free resource. So I don't have a book to give you. This is the only book I can give you, and it's online. It's available to anybody. Another thing I want to talk about is groups. If you have users, then you have groups. Okay. Come back to Active Directory. Have groups. All right, so look at a list of groups. Sales, marketing, sales, HR, IT, developers, customer MNC, all kinds of groups here. And I can create a new group if I have the permission. So key features of group management: group type, okay, and membership type. Very important. Group type can either be security group or Microsoft 365 group. So this is going to depend on the license you have. If you have the P1 or the P2 license, then you can use the security group type. But if you are only limited to the Microsoft 365 license, you will just be using this Microsoft 365. With the Microsoft 365 group, is only limited. You are limited a lot. You are only limited to Microsoft 365 applications, SharePoint, Mail, Outlook, OneDrive, and everything similar to that. But with security group, that is enterprise level. You want to have access to Azure resources, okay? You want to manage devices, Active Directory at the enterprise level. You want to manage service principals. You want to manage groups. You want to automatically add users to specific groups. Then you are going to use security group. You might have come across that maybe when somebody was trying to create an account, or somebody wanted to add you to a distribution list in your company, and they said, are you on the security group, or you need to request to join a security group? So it's a different ball game entirely. So let's give this group a name. Training class. That's a group name. Provide a description. You have roles that you want to integrate. So right now we don't have any roles. Just click no. So membership type can either be assigned a dynamic user or dynamic device. So for you to be able to navigate across these options, where's my mouse? So for you to be able to select from these options, you must have the P1 or P2 license. So Microsoft 365 license, free license, you won't be able to select dynamic user or dynamic device. It's just going to populate assigned for you. So let's we'll come back. I'll test this for you. So assigned or dynamic user. So when we say dynamic user, that means we are going to create rules that will dynamically add and remove users from this group. This is a training class group. And if you select the dynamic device, that means that any device that we want to add to this group will be dynamically added. That means will be automatically added based on some queries, based on some rules that we will have set up. So if you go for assign, that means you have to manually add or remove users. So if I go for dynamic user, let me select the owner. Let's give this Alex the owner. Dynamic query. So I need to set up the query. Now, add property. So we can say maybe every user that their country equals United States. Okay, and their job title contains training. Okay, if you want to add anything, or let's see, department equals training group. Okay, so anybody that falls under these properties will be automatically added to this group you are creating right now. And you don't have to create the syntax. As you are adding the rules, it's going to populate the syntax for you. Okay, and you're going to save and create the group. So this is how we create group. Might take a while. Okay, group trading. So if I refresh now, so it might take like few minutes for this to come up here. Okay, this is the group. This is the yeah. No, I don't think this is what we created. What was the name we used? Training class. Okay, so you can see that group type security, created in the cloud, membership type dynamic. So if I add a user that falls under the category I provided, okay, their name or location is in the US, just automatically add them here. If it's a device also, it will also fall under that grouping. So let's look at the nodes. Security groups, use security groups to set permissions for all group members at the same time, rather than adding permissions to each member individually. Remember, when I was creating the first user, I had to set the roles, okay? But best practice, the reasonable thing to do is to create the groups and then add users to the group. Because in a situation whereby you are dealing with 400 users, 20 are going to be in the training team, 25 are going to be in the HR, 30 are going to be in the developers team. So are you going to be adding them one after the other? Or you just create the developers group, add all the permissions at the group level, and add the users. Okay, so that's the best practice. Don't create users and add the groups individually. Create the groups, add users to the group. Why do we have to do this? What if the user is transferred to another group? Okay, the user was in the IT cloud admins group, and now he has been promoted to a manager. So if he had individual permissions, he will still carry those permissions to the manager group, even though he doesn't need the IT cloud administrators group permissions anymore. But because you added the permissions individually, he will still be able to perform the task of an IT cloud admin, even though he's not a manager. But if you have added the permissions at the group level, once you remove the user and promote him to manager, he has no permissions attached to him until he joins another group. So whatever permissions that has been added to the group, it will inherit those permissions. So that's another security best practice. Okay, never add permissions at user level, add permissions at group level. So add them to the group, create the permissions, and then, so maybe the person is transferred to another team, okay? Or the person resigned, but still have access to his credentials. You know, some organizations are very funny. Even after you have left their company, they won't deactivate your accounts due to negligence. So that if you even try to sign in, you will still be able to sign in. So that's a security risk. So remember I said you can assign or you can either go for assigning group type or dynamically adding user or dynamically adding devices. Okay, that means you're automating how you add users or remove users based on the rules that we have created. Right, so that is that for groups. Let's come back here. Let's see if there's something else I need to add. Users and groups. Okay, so role-based access control. Okay. Let me see if this video is 2 minutes. Let's watch this video and then come back. Let me know if you can hear.
In this video, we're going to talk about role-based access control, also known as RBAC, RBAC, and how it can make your Azure resources more secure. Virtual machines, websites, networks, and storage, all these are critical resources for any organization using the cloud. And when it comes to protecting these resources, security is paramount. Of course, these precious assets need to be locked down, but it's your job to grant your employees and partners the access they need to perform their jobs. You can also use RBAC to grant access from one resource to another. In Azure, role-based access control, again, RBAC, is an authorization system that will help you manage who and what has access to all your Azure resources, what these people can do with those resources, and where they have access. So to start, the way you control access to resources is to create a role assignment. This is how permissions are enforced. And to create a role assignment, you need 3 elements: a security principle, a role definition, and a scope. Let's think of these elements as the who, the what, and the where. A security principle is just a fancy name for a user, a group, or an application that you want to grant access to. But it's important to remember this is not just for people. One application can be a principal that has access to another resource. The what you determine a security principal can do is specified with a role definition. A role definition is a collection of permissions, sometimes just called a role for short. It lists the permissions that can be performed, such as read, write, and delete. Azure has several of these built-in roles that you can use, such as owner or virtual machine contributor. And finally, where. This is the access given, and we call this a scope. In Azure, you can specify a scope at multiple levels, such as a management group, a subscription, a resource group, or an individual resource, and those permissions are inherited to sublevels. So once you've determined the who, the what, and the where, then you combine these elements to grant access with a role assignment. You create a role assignment using the Azure portal, Azure PowerShell, or some other methods. And that's it. Using RBAC to create role assignments to grant access to Azure resources is pretty straightforward. Just remember, role assignments consist of a security principle, a role, and a scope, and you'll be good to go. We hope this gives you a better understanding of how to protect your Azure resources and why RBAC is a pretty powerful tool that will make your life easier and your organization more secure.
Right, so that's
in this video,
introduction to role-based access control. So this is how we manage access to resources. There is Azure Active Directory roles for identity management. Then there is the Azure role-based access control, where we manage access to resources. So we can scope. So you'll be hearing about scope. We can scope this, we can enforce these roles at the management group level, okay, or at a subscription level. So this is a hierarchy in Azure. So you have the subscription, on top of the subscription is the management group, and in the subscription is the resource group, okay? So you are going to be creating your resources. You're going to be creating the services within this resource group. So your resources that you're creating are going to be created in the resource group. So you have a resource group, RG, and we clear this out. So you have so this is the resource group, and these are the resources. So resources include virtual machines, virtual network, app services, storage, Synapse, all those cool features, cool resources in Azure are all resources. So you're going to be creating load balancers, okay, subnets, okay, that's part of virtual network. But all the resources in Azure have to be tied to a resource group. Your resource group is going to be tied to a subscription. Your subscription is going to be tied to a management group. And of course, there's the root management group. Okay, so if you create a Microsoft account, you automatically inherit the super user, which is a global administrator. Okay, so just like in Linux, you have the super user. In Linux, the equivalent of the super user in Linux is a global administrator that has the access to do anything. Like it can wake up tomorrow and delete your Active Directory if you didn't wake up on the right side of the bed. So you have to be careful who has the global administrator role in your organization. Let's look at some roles in Azure. Okay, roles and administrators. So these are different roles. Let's see if we can see owner. Group global administrator. Okay, so look at global administrator. Okay, I am a global administrator. Look at the description. So users with this role have access to all administrative features. Okay, they have access to all administrative features in Active Directory. They can do and undo. You don't want to give everybody this level of access. Of course, they have their dedicated functionalities. You can look at their permissions, create and delete access reviews, read and update all properties, update authentication method for users. So these are, you can perform everything. So it's very important that you note who has access to what. So let's look at some other roles. There's a global reader. This one can read everything, but cannot modify anything. Okay. Description. Users with this one can read everything that a GA can, but not update anything, can't do anything. Now, there are dedicated roles. So let's look for network-related roles. Maybe you just want to give the user network administrator roles. So what can you do? User with this role can review network parameter architecture recommendations, network performance. Okay, this role allows for editing of discover user location. So these are the only things this guy can do. It's not a global administrator. So make sure you exercise the least privilege management principle. Least privilege management to users. Just what they need when they need it. If they need to have their access elevated, let it go through a protocol. Let it go through a channel. Don't let anybody just call you by the phone. I need access to the production virtual network. Can you grant me administrator role on that network? You know, you can't do that over the phone. So can you put it in writing? Can you send him? Can you shoot me an email? You know, so that you can have written document. You can have a paper trail. So because tomorrow somebody can deny, oh, I didn't ask him to do it for me, just did it for me, and the other person has caused trouble for the company already. So make sure there are policies in place guiding how permissions are granted to users and how roles are elevated for users. So now let's go to a resource virtual machine. Let's see if we have virtual networks. I think we have some virtual networks. So role-based access control. So the ones I showed you is based on Active Directory roles. Those are Active Directory roles where you have global users. Now, role-based access control is to manage access to resources. So this is a resource. Virtual network is a resource in Azure. And I have like 6 virtual networks created in this account. Now I can determine who has access to what. So this is the core services virtual network. Let's look at the roles. This is where we start talking about owner, contributor, reader. So all these are role-based access control features. So on this resource, this core services, I can grant a user, maybe let me grant somebody reader. Okay, reader, add role assignment, reader to who? Remember, we have all kinds of users. So I'm going to add this to James Bond. James Bond will have the reader role. But remember I said, add your roles at the group level. So let's look for the group. Let's look for, okay, this is dummy. Okay, no use. Let's use community engagement. So that's a group. Let's remove, maybe James Bond is a member of community engagement group. So if James Bond is a member of community engagement group, then he will be able to have that assignment, that role assignment, right? So add access at group level. In some cases, you might need to add at a personal level, but let it be spelled out to you in black and white. Okay, so community engagement, review, and assign. Okay, I don't have subscription, so I need to put in subscription. That is why it's not successful, because I need a subscription. Let me see, there's let's try over this. Yeah, virtual machines, no. Virtual network. Virtual networks. Okay, so I have a virtual network, access control, add. So I can add, you can customize these roles. So you can, maybe you have your customized roles in GitHub. You can migrate it to Azure. You want to customize your role assignment, fine, you can do that. Add role assignment, reader. What's a reader? So the super user here is the owner. Grants full access to manage your resources, okay? Then there is a contributor, which can, the only thing is that it cannot modify, but he has the same access as the owner, but in his own case, he cannot modify, he can't change, he can't add user. You know, you can just view and modify what you are viewing, but you can't delete, you can't add, you can only modify. So most of the time, the owner will grant contributor role to the next person so that at least it can view to an extent, but not the total action that the owner can perform. So I just grant somebody the okay, the group. Let's look at the group. Developers. So they are going to have the reader role, review, and assign. So I've granted the developers group the reader access on this virtual network. So it can be another resource. This is where we're going to end the class. So far I've showed us Active Directory. I've showed us how to create users, how to create groups. If you want to bulk create users, if you want to bulk create groups, I've showed us. If you want to invite users. So now another assignment, invite a user. So I want you to go through that process. Invite a user into your portal, into your account. Okay. I taught us how to create users into the organization, but now you want to invite a user. So go ahead, invite a user, follow the processes, let me know what you find out. And then the other assignment is that, what was the other assignment?
They said research the AD join that has 3 features and what devices are applicable to use these features.
Yes. So research all the join features in Azure Active Directory and check out what they are used for. Okay. Do we have any questions? So Saturday is going to be the last for Active Directory. Active Directory is very wide, very, very wide. You can never exhaust it. So, but the information I've given you so far can help you start something. So that's why I said, go and read up on those ones and let's discuss it on Saturday. So do you have any other question? You good? Okay, for the sake of our folks that are up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., we're going to, please check out this link I just posted in the chat. It breaks down the role-based access control features. Okay, please. It's very wide, so try to read up that document and let me. So this will help you if you are preparing for the exam. How many people are preparing to write the AZ-104 exam?